Hi guys, welcome to your screencast on the aerobic system. Please make sufficient notes during this for tomorrow's lesson. Okay, now before we start on the aerobic system, I'm just going to look back at what we've done previously and how we're all linking it together. So we've looked at the anaerobic kind of physiology aspect in terms of muscle fibre types, being fast oxidative glycolytic type 2A, and we've got fast glycolytic type 2B. We've looked at the energy system, so the ATP-PC system, glycolytic system. We've looked at components of fitness and the ergogenic aids as well. So now we're starting on aerobic physiology. So we're going to do a quick recap in lesson on the muscle fibres, okay, specifically the slow oxidative type 1 fibres, as this is linked to aerobic physiology. We're also going to look at the aerobic system, which this screencast is going to focus on. And then we're going to look at aerobic capacity for components of fitness, and then finally the pharmacological, physiological and nutritional ergogenic aids with regards to the aerobic system. So this is just an overview of what we've got left to do, and as I've said, we've got this focus on aerobic physiology. Okay, now in terms of the specification, we've already looked at this area here, i.e. ATP being the energy currency. Energy systems, we've looked at ATP-PC and the glycolytic system, and we've looked at these kind of processes here, terms to those energy systems. Over the next couple of days we're going to do an aerobic system, and we're going to ensure that we know all this information here with regards to the aerobic energy system. Okay, so this is what a typical question may look like. This is a specimen paper. This is a 20 marker. Okay, and the 20 marker here, explain how the aerobic system provides energy during a marathon, and how cardiovascular adaptations as a result of an aerobic training program can enhance aerobic capacity. So focus is on this part, this aspect over the next couple of lessons. Then obviously we're going to be doing a whole load of cardiovascular adaptations and aerobic capacity as well. So first of all, key terms. I want you to get these three key terms written down. Okay, so first of all, mitochondria. What is it? It's a structure within the cell where aerobic respiration takes place. Okay, now this is kind of like a mitochondria here. The key parts we're interested in is the matrix and the cristae. Okay, and the reason for that is there's three parts for the aerobic system. The first part is aerobic glycolysis, then we have the Krebs cycle, and then the third part is electron transport chain. So the Krebs cycle is the second stage of the aerobic system, produces 2 ATP, it takes part in the mitochondrial matrix, so in this part here. Now the third and final stage of the aerobic system, the electron transport chain, this produces 34 ATP, and this takes place in the cristae. Okay, these kind of folded inner membrane here, this is where the cristae is. Okay, so it's really important to get these key notes down here, and then we'll go through the aerobic system now, just in kind of brief terms really, just to ensure that you know the order of it and the key terms and words that are going to be used. So first of all, as I've said, we've got aerobic glycolysis. Okay, so stage 1 name, aerobic glycolysis, very similar to anaerobic glycolysis. However, when there is oxygen present, it's obviously called aerobic glycolysis, and when we get to pyruvic acid, it takes a different stage or different step. Okay, we're going to go through that now. Important, this takes place in the muscle sarcoplasm. So we start with glycogen, and that's broken down by GPP into glucose, and glucose is broken down by PFK to create 2 ATP, and then we are left with pyruvic acid. If this was anaerobic glycolysis, we'd then get lactic acid produced, wouldn't we? However, there is sufficient oxygen available now. Okay, so this pyruvic acid is no longer converting to lactic acid. It goes through a link reaction catalyzed by coenzyme A, which produces acetyl-CoA. So what happens is, pyruvic acid, so oxygen is present, pyruvic acid joins with coenzyme A to make acetyl-CoA, which is this step here. Okay. Then acetyl-CoA joins with oxaloacetic acid, and then we get citric acid. So what happens is acetyl-CoA joins with oxaloacetic acid, and then we get citric acid. And then we have kind of like the Krebs cycle. Okay, so the Krebs cycle, you basically got acetyl-CoA. This combines with oxaloacetic acid to form citric acid, which is oxidized through a cycle of reactions. This is known as the Krebs cycle. And from this you have carbon dioxide produced, 2 ATP and hydrogen. Okay, now this takes place, or this kind of process occurs, in the matrix of the mitochondria. So the mitochondria matrix. So this is that cell that is kind of responsible for aerobic energy production. So this part, the muscle cytoplasm, from this process we get into the mitochondria matrix, which is responsible for aerobic production. So what happens now is the hydrogen atoms are carried through the electron transport chain via NAD and FAD. So you have hydrogen plus NAD and FAD, then we get NADH and FADH, or NADH and FADH. We're going to go on about this in a bit more detail in lesson. I just want you to get the step-by-step process, okay? So then when you have hydrogen combining with NAD and FAD to make NADH and FADH, we get into the electron transfer chain, okay? Now, this takes place in the mitochondria cristae, which are those kind of folds within a membrane that I spoke about on the previous slide. From this process here, we get 34 ATP, and we get oxygen going in and H2O going out. And again, we'll talk about how H2O is produced tomorrow in more detail. So, this process here, glycogen broken down into glucose by GPP, PFK breaks glucose down into pyruvic acid and creates 2 ATP. We should know that now. That is part of anaerobic glycolysis. However, with regards to the aerobic system, oxygen is now present. So because oxygen is present, pyruvic acid joined with coenzyme A to make acetyl-CoA. Acetyl-CoA joined with oxaloacetic acid to make citric acid. This goes into the Krebs cycle, and then we have carbon dioxide produced, hydrogen, and 2 ATP. Now what happens is this hydrogen combined with NAD and FAD to make NADH and FADH. This goes into the electron transfer chain, 34 ATP produced, oxygen coming in, H2O going out. That is the process of the aerobic system. Okay, now when all three stages are combined, we get 1 mole of glucose. So this here, so 1 mole of glucose actually creates 38 moles of ATP. So we've got 34, 35, 36, 37, 38. Okay. Now this is highly efficient and most preferable for kind of long duration, low to moderate intensity activities such as marathons, triathlons, cross-country skiing, Tour de France cycling, and so on. The higher the performer's aerobic capacity, the faster oxygen will arrive in plentiful supply and the switch can be made to aerobic energy production. Okay. Now, when we use fats, because we have to talk about fats within this as well, and we're going to go on this on about this in more detail in the lesson. When we use fats, even more ATP is produced. Okay. But as I've said, we'll go on about this in a lesson in more detail. All I want you to really focus on is this process and this order of what happens and what takes place. Okay. Tomorrow's lesson we'll probably go through just the process, the order in more detail, and then we'll get into the nitty-gritty stuff in kind of like over the next couple of lessons after this process. Okay, so it's really important. You know the stage is named, so stage 1 being aerobic glycolysis, and you know where it takes place, muscle cytoplasm. Stage 2 being the Krebs cycle, and the fact that it takes place at the mitochondria matrix. Stage 3, the electron transfer chain, and it takes place in the cristae. Now, I still want cornell notes on this, okay? The types of kind of information you want to be focusing on are these stage names here. You want to focus on this part here. This part is the part that students kind of struggle with. So you might want to say when oxygen is present, pyruvic acid joined with which CoA to form acetyl-CoA, or acetyl-CoA joined with which O to create citric acid. Yeah, so this is the part that students tend to get a bit confused with and a bit it was made to be complicated. It is a process that doesn't change. Just memorise, go over your notes, constantly keep going over the process and order of the aerobic system. So if you make notes on that, I'll see you in tomorrow's lesson. We'll go through some more detail. Thank you. Bye.